Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this panel on Made in Senegal about Sadio Mané, the documentary. I want to welcome everybody who's joined us on Zoom and via Facebook Live. And a really big appreciation to Papa and Gerard, who are handling the technology to get us all together, and to Bose, who is also monitoring the Facebook chat group. Papa, did you want to say a few things about the technical aspects of this at all, or how people should be participating?
Sure. Yeah, like Martha said, we welcome everybody to this event. Hopefully everybody can hear me. On the Zoom side, if you're on Zoom, please remember to mute your cameras when you're not speaking or when you've been elevated to speak. That way we don't get a lot of feedback. Can everybody hear me? Simon, Dr. Akindes?
I can hear you.
Great. Okay. So on the Zoom side, if you are on Zoom, please remember to mute your camera when you're not speaking. And if you need to speak and you're not being heard, just find the raise your hand feature and we will get a hold of you. On the Facebook live side, please put your comments in the chat box and we will elevate it and we will send it on to the panelists, and the moderator, Dr. Saavedra. So that'll be for the technical stuff. Before we start, also, we want to thank a lot of our sponsors and our panelists for doing this, especially our Senegal partner, WARC. It's always great to work with WARC and everything we do with them. Our foundational sponsors, Ohio University, for all the support they've given us, and the departments at Ohio University that help us out a lot, including sports, the Center for International Studies, the Multicultural Student Center, especially their BSCPB group. We really appreciate their continued support of Sports Africa. And then we also want to thank African Studies Association for for helping us with all our logistics and stuff when we travel overseas. So that being said, I'm going to hand over to Dr. Saavedra, and then we can get the show going. Martha.
Great, thank you, Papa. So our panel, we're really happy to do this today. We've been talking for a long time about doing something online, and now here we are. So our organization is Sports Africa. We are a vibrant, intellectual, passionate community of both practitioners and academics who are working to advance African sports studies. Our organization is very interdisciplinary, very inclusive, accessible, and we are really looking to make African sport the study of African sport, part of the global conversation and scholarship on sport. So it began, and I won't go into that much of the history, but this has been an ongoing project since 2003. We started at the African Studies Association in Boston, and then began organizing conferences based initially at Ohio University. And again, Ohio University is so integral to the birth of this organization and carrying it forward for so many years. So we had 10 conferences at Ohio University. And then we decided that if we're talking about African sport, we had to do this on the continent. So the last 3 conferences have been in Africa, in South Africa, in Zambia, and Senegal. And we were due to have a conference this July at Nelson Mandela University in Port Elizabeth. But because of the current situation that we're in with COVID-19, we've had to postpone that. In the meantime, we've decided to really push forward this longstanding idea of doing online webinars to really make what we do accessible and to bring in many voices. So we're very happy that we're here today. If you want to join our organization, you can do it right now through the African Studies Association, through their membership page. We can provide more information and about our organization. And once we move on, I'll put in the chat box a little bit more information about our organization. So at this point, before we get into the panel, we were going to show the trailer of the film to give the flavor, to get Sadio Mané's voice in this. So Papa, are you going to cue that or should I cue that? No. I think you're...
I can cue it. I have it ready to go.
Okay, great.
Sadio Mané! And Mané! Brilliant!
He pushed himself hard to get what he wanted.
And Mané! Brilliant!
He pushed himself hard to get what he wanted.
Sadio hat riesige Sachen auf sich genommen, um heute hier zu sein.
He knows what he wanted to do and he pushed himself hard to get what he wanted.
D'un petit village du Sénégal qui s'appelle Berkeley.
Il fait partie de ce cas.
Sadio Adindima, Sabodini Muyalone, Kabra Dindi.
De fierté, de voir.
J'étais considéré comme le meilleur joueur du village. Mais personne dans ma famille voulait que je devienne footballeur.
Sadio hat riesige
J'étais
Sachen
convaincu à 100% qu'une fois quitté le village, je pouvais devenir footballeur.
Besonderes.
Ma seule question qui revenait dans ma tête, c'est comment. C'était le début d'un rêve. Mon rêve, c'est ce qui est exceptionnel, seulement je ne sais pas honnêtement. Tous les profs, je suis quelqu'un de très très simple. J'ai été élevé comme ça.
Mané scores in style!
Mon rêve, c'est d'écrire l'histoire et de gagner tous les trophées. C'est un rêve de gamin, bien sûr.
Tell you best. I swear life is like a dream. I can't tell what's next.
And Mané! Brilliant!
Over back to you, Master.
Okay, great. And before we proceed, Papa, do we have the Facebook live stream going yet?
Yes, we do have the Facebook live stream going. It is in the Facebook event on the Sports Africa page. So if you're not seeing it, you have to be in this Facebook event. If you RSVP for the Facebook event, it is in there.
Okay. All right. So we'll continue to monitor that. So great. Thank you. There's still some messages coming that they can't see on Facebook. So we shall work through that. In the meantime, I am going to introduce very briefly the panelists for today. Our stellar group here. Professor Akindes is in philosophy and law at the University of Wisconsin-Parkside in the United States. Living a little further over there in the United States, we have Alegi, who is at the Michigan State University in the Department of History. Tarminder Kaur is, yes.
I was letting you know we're having some issues with your sound, but I think it's fixed.
It's
Okay.
better now. It was cutting.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Old computer. So our third panelist is Tarminder Kaur, and she's at the University of Johannesburg in South Africa, where she is a postdoctoral fellow in anthropology and development studies. And then moving up to Senegal, we're joined by Ousmane Sène, who is a professor of English at the University of Cheikh Anta Diop, and also the director of the West African Research Center. So we will proceed first with Simone and Peter have both posted videos on our website, the Sport Africa website, with their detailed comments. So here they are just going to speak for a few minutes to highlight some of the things that they had observed in the documentary. And then we have longer comments by Tarminder and Ousmane to follow that. So, Simone, you're muted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm Simon Akindes, and I had the privilege of watching this movie. And I must say right away that I love the movie. I love anytime there is a story about any African player or some African doing something around the world, it is always a good thing to see which angle it is coming from. So after watching the movie, I just decided, if I should speak so, that the movie was certainly Sadio Mané made in Senegal, but it was also Sadio Mané made out of Senegal. Made in Senegal in the sense that, well, his humility, the simple life that he likes, his desire to help others, and living his love for community life. All those things are things that you acquire when you grow up in Africa. Whether you grew up in an urban setting or whether you grew up in a rural setting, those are things that we are always, asked to emulate, this kind of humility. So in that sense, I would say that he was made in Senegal. Now, about football, I'm not sure, Generation Foot was just about 6 months in his life. He started playing in the village. I'm not sure whether we can say that he was made in Senegal when it comes to football itself. He had the luck of going through Generation Foot, only 6 months, and then he was parachuted, in Metz, where his career started. That was 10 years ago. Now he's 28, 10 years in Europe, and he's made it to where he is now a global star. So my point here is that he was made also out of Africa. The movie didn't tell us much about the conditions or the environment of football itself in Senegal. But one thing the movie really emphasized again and again was this idea that if you work hard, this idea if you are determined, if you know what you want, then you're going to succeed. What we did not see, or what we do not see, is the environment of football itself in Senegal. We don't know anything about all the many players that have played with Sadio Mané and that I don't know where they are. Last time I checked, there were about 537 Senegalese players playing outside of Senegal. And then last year alone, according to a website from Sène, there are 203 Senegalese players who left Senegal between 2018 and 2019. So this tells us something. So my question here really is, how do we create some kind of sport environment where you are born in Senegal? And when I say born in Senegal, it's just a metaphor for saying born in Africa, where you can grow up, play, be trained, and then become famous just like Sadio Mané. How is that possible? And those are the questions that I think that the movie is posing and that we should be looking at.
Okay.
I think I'm done.
Yeah. Peter.
Hello, everyone. It's graduation day here in East Lansing, Michigan, and there are no students. This is the weird time we live in. So I thought I'd play the part of the professor. I left my comments on the site through the video that's also available on YouTube, so I'm not going to go into the details that I probed in that video. What I do want to touch back on or reflect a little bit further on are two critical points that I made at the end of the video. One is about kind of the politics and economics of migration of African footballers overseas. And the other one is about personal relationships. So the film is fantastic in many ways. I'll be showing it in my summer course on global soccer. So I'm not going to spend too much time here, celebrating it. But what I want to point out is that Sadio Mané's extraordinary story also distracts or obfuscates really how the process of African football migration to Europe and to a certain extent Asia as well actually works. So research by Raphaël Epoli, as well as by others like Todd Cleveland and Sebastian Abbott, Carl Gustav Scott, shows that the vast majority of African players in Europe eventually end up playing in less competitive leagues, places, for example, in Southeastern Europe or Eastern Europe, or in lower tiers in Western Europe. So second division, third division, even fourth division, and many others just disappear. There are many reasons for this. I can't get into it now, from the vagaries of football to homesickness, racism, lack of support, etc., etc. But the overall picture is really not the picture that we see in the Mané film. Tied to that is really the economic dimension of the story, of labor migration, of capitalist sport, if you will. And that is that when young African men and women increasingly are moving overseas, the European or Asian club that buys their services usually buys at a fairly low price and then sells them off after a couple of years to another club, hopefully for those involved, a higher level club for a profit. And then if the player really succeeds, there's a third or sometimes even fourth sale within the internal market of, let's say Europe, for even greater profit. And all along this commodity chain, the profits accumulate overwhelmingly to the European clubs and middlemen. There is none of this covered in the film. And indeed, Mané would be a good case study, albeit a very successful one, because he goes from Metz to RB Salzburg, to Southampton, to Liverpool. But really the narrative in the story goes from Metz super quickly through Salzburg and Southampton, which was, 4 or 5 years of his career. And then, of course, Champions League greatness with Liverpool. So, an engagement with that, I think, is really important to understand also what Professor Akindes was just talking about in terms of Africa's position in the global political economy of soccer. If we focus so much on the individual, we sometimes miss the bigger picture. The second point has to do with personal relationships, which we get very little about, particularly in Europe of Mané's story. We get a little bit of a hint when he arrives in Metz of the culture shock and some other issues, but we really don't get to know more about language issues, for example, that many African players face across Europe. And I'm sure there were some for Mané in Austria, for example, because I don't think he spoke German going there. And England, a very different reality, of course, from France. What about any assistance you got in navigating sports life as a professional? This is where a lot of young African players stumble right off the bat. What was his relationship with his teammates in the dressing room? How did he react to a different kind of training? What did his first contract look like? Most African players sign very short contracts, which makes them extremely vulnerable to injury or an unsupportive coach, etc. And finally, in terms of on-the-field relationships, I was struck by the fact that he seemed to have fit in right away. And that is not typical, again, of many African or indeed many foreign players in European football. And I wonder how much this had to do with his attacking position as well as his technical skills. That is, the fact that he was a fast attacking player seemed to me to fit what would likely be racialized expectations for an African player. And I can get into the history of that later on. Also off the field, in terms of personal relationships, the expectation in Europe is that Africans quickly assimilate into the host culture. That's very, very difficult depending on where you are. But what was it like in Austria? We don't have any idea of that. And I would argue that Austria was actually absolutely critical in Mané's experience from rags to riches. What did he do in his free time? You know, does he play video games like so many professional players, or does he read books, or does he do other things? Did he hang out and build a network with other African players or Black footballers or even foreign teammates? Did he experience social isolation at any time or racism from the terraces? And was being Muslim ever a factor, positive or negative, in his life outside of the game? We really don't get any insight on any of those things. And I think those are really important to understanding Mané too, because he's so strong a person and character and discipline and motivation. Surely what he brought with him from Bambali to his European experience had a lot to do with why he was successful. It went well beyond technical skills. And those things you can't coach. Those things you cannot teach. And this has been shown by lots and lots of books, and also shown in the frustration that many scouts have in Europe, which is they want to be able to predict which young African players will become superstars like Mané, and they struggle despite the fact that the technology is advanced to the point where there is artificial intelligence that has come up with all sorts of new statistical data and predictions, and very rarely do they actually predict correctly who is going to succeed on the international stage out of Africa and who does not. And I would argue that a lot of this has to do, again, with those personal dimensions that the film does not do justice to. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Peter. We're going to hop on over to South Africa now, to Tarminder. I know your connection's a bit difficult there, but let's see how this works.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead, it's yours.
Okay, cool. I really hope it works, and I'll try to keep it short. Okay, great, thanks. Can you hear me?
We can even see you.
Can everyone hear?
Oh, we hear you and we see you. We can hear you and we can see you. Just go ahead, tell me the.
Okay, great, thank you. So, I mean, I already have a very good lead. So, and I hope many present have actually seen the documentary. So what I do in my review is actually take on this idea that, the naming of the film, Sadio Mané, made in Senegal. So I actually really hold on to that made in Senegal, and kind of argue that Sadio Mané kind of represents this fair trade product. What is made in, when is something labeled made in, it's usually labeled for a product. And Sadio Mané is a product, right? Even a brand, $20 million. His net worth is $20 million. So if you see him as a brand, it's very much a fair trade brand. I mean, if you from the documentary, you see his transition from a remote village in Senegal and transitioning through within like 10 years. He just, moves right up to the top of the game. So, and in return, I mean, he's not just treated as cheap African labor. He's rewarded. He's respected, he's almost worshipped. I mean, especially the scenes when you see the Liverpool fans, it's like, it's a whole kind of scene where he's being worshipped by his fans. So in that, I argue that he is a fair trade footballer. But I think his fair trade or his genuine humanness go there, and that's what film seems to highlight. And I mean, there's something very relatable that happens when you, as you watch, especially his early commentaries on how all he ever wanted was become a footballer. There's a very childlike, like aspirational feeling to it, which is relatable. And I think I would like to quote like these early lines when he says, my dream is to write history, like not physically write history, of course. My dream is to write history and win all the trophies. It's a dream of a child, of course. And I say, of course it's a dream of a child. All the many football mad children I have come to know would say just the same things. They all dream of becoming professional football players. They all want to win all the trophies again as well. And many of those dreams take on like really elaborate and sometimes very practical versions, from playing, like sometimes saying that they're going to pay me back once they become the champions for the petrol for taking them to the field, or how they're going to contribute to their village once they become the champions. So, but you know, when you're listening to Mané, there's a rub, right? His commentaries in the film are like almost filling colors, childhood dreams. There's a vantage point. It's in hindsight, right? It's after the fact. He's already achieved his. So we see that there, and I think but it's his. It's right at the end. So I'm going to take you to right at the 1 hour 10 minutes of the film, and that's where you kind of really get the feeling or a sense of a mature and good human being. So for that, I'm actually just going to read what I wrote, if that's okay with everyone. So just to set the scene, he's on the balcony of a first floor school building. It's the school which he's making in Bambali, in his village.
We have a slight lag, and we're hoping it'll catch up in a minute there. So this is the wonders of global connections. So while we wait for Tarminder to come back on, I think what she was mentioning was in the movie where he is, in his village, he's created a school, and he is on the balcony of that. It's a 2-story one. If you look in previously they never had a big school like that. And so then he's on the balcony looking out, and all the kids come in. I'm not sure how fast we'll get Tarminder back on, but she said she's disconnected right now. So I think what we'll do is we'll move to Ousmane, and then if Tarminder comes back in, we'll integrate her final comments into the discussion. Okay, all right, so Ousmane, over to Dakar.
Okay, thank you very much. A pleasure to be part of this. I have a, look, I am tempted to go back to what Simon said about the fact that we don't have many other characters included in the story, and you know, the film does not tell us the story of football in Senegal, even though lately Sadio Mané performed in the Senegalese national team under the coaching of Aliou Cissé, whom we know along with Alegi. And before these global stars, we had Bokande. Yeah, thank you very much, Alegi, number 11. But if you take a time to look at the title, because a film is a work of just like literature is, you know, after all, the title of a film is Sadio Mané, made in Senegal. I think right at the outset, because of the way the title is structured, we should be understanding that the focus will be, yes, certainly on a football player, but he is not going to be some sort of symbolic representation of the others. There will be some personal dimension to it. That's Sadio Mané. And Sadio Mané, as related to whatever he did as a soccer player recognized worldwide, but Sadio Mané as we trace back where he comes from. That is why actually, for me, we could say Sadio Mané made it as a footballer, but Sadio Mané was able to make it because of who he is, apart and beyond the fact of being a soccer player. It is Sadio Mané, the young man imbued with the values of his community. It is Sadio Mané praying each time he can. It is Sadio Mané generous. It is Sadio Mané and his humility. It is Sadio Mané and all his human and moral values which made Sadio Mané be a success, along with whatever skill he has as a soccer player. And in this respect, because I still consider this a work of God, when I try to see the stock in trade in art, particularly in literature, I have two areas to which I can tie the story of a film itself. It sends you back to what you call some sort of fairy tale. He said, I'm going to Dakar to live my dream. I'm going to Dakar to fulfill my dream. I am going to elope with my destiny. So it is the fairy tale of this young rural African boy who apparently doesn't have any opening because he doesn't want to go to school or to continue going to school, but who believes in his lucky star somewhere, just like Gatsby's star, and looking at the star and saying, this is going to be me. And because of sheer conviction and determination, because he says, il faut rêver. I always tell you, il faut rêver. I always tell you, we need to dream. We have to dream to get wherever we can get. So we have a fairy tale of a young soccer, a promising young soccer kicker who doesn't even have a reasonable or decent pair of shoes, and who the first time he set foot in Europe, when he started practicing in the first team, you remember he was out there with skinny, t-shirts, and he nearly died of cold. In Senegal, he did not have the right apparel. Even in his early days in Europe, he did not have a right apparel, totally destitute, and being able to make it. This is what a fairy tale is made of, right? From destitute, from poverty, you go and make it and you will be the superstar, respected by everybody. We have that sense. And this is typical, of stories told in Africa, from the village to the city. It is a stock in trade. Even in American literature, if you go to Dreiser, you have the same stuff. But there is also this dimension of some sort of the novel of a film of apprenticeship, going from innocence to experience, but in the positive sense. We have Sadio Mané going from the village where he doesn't know, he knows the minimum. You remember what he said about Dakar? Dakar is sophisticated, civilized. We talk about the city lights. The city lights for somebody coming way from the rural areas where the only thing you can expect to light your night is a candle or a hurricane lamp. And just, going to Dakar as an anonymity, his family looking for him for 2 weeks, and he being willing to go back, but he says, I'm coming back, but at this point of time, you will need to let me go. And going, but while learning to be among the best players, he also learned to be a man of the world. Before leaving his rural village, what did Sadio Mané know about, about the world? What did he know about Senegal? Absolutely nothing. But as he's traveling, pursuing his dream, he will be developing a personality called Sadio Mané, already steeped, forged in the traditional values he imbibed from the village. And he could not escape it because he said, my uncle bought everything for me. So this notion of giving back is already very highly developed in him. And, all these together have made Sadio Mané, who even in Liverpool still believe in this. No man is an island. What does he say commenting about Liverpool? In équipe, c'est une famille. So this notion of being a member of a community, this notion of no matter how big you may grow, remember that you belong to the community and you should be paying your due respect to the community, plus giving back if ever you made it, because without them, you would never be able to ever make it. And, donc, this hope, extraordinary hope, il faut toujours rêver. You have to dream all the time. You need to dream to make your dream come true. And you keep dreaming all the time. That's important. But the humility, 2019, we all were dreaming, hoping that we would just have this African nation cup, but it did not come. What did he say? That's extraordinary. It is even before the year before, when he did not have the European distinction. He said, no. I keep learning. I am still learning, and I will always be willing to learn. Each defeat for him is made or is turned into a lesson in life. It is as if he was saying, it is in failure that you will be able ever to succeed, as long as you're willing to go the whole hog. And that extraordinary capacity for hope in the future is something that which made also Sadio Mané, along with what he said, dans la vie, il faut aider. Life is worth what it is if we are willing to help each other, no matter who we are. And help not from top to bottom, but help because we belong to the community and we are all equal partners. I think that those are the ingredients which are in Sadio Mané, are still in him. But just look at the film and look at Sadio Mané talking, speaking, answering questions, the shyness, touching his hand all the time, saying one or two words, and the way he's going to twist a little bit his mouth. All this shows you a young boy who is still very, very shy, and who, because he believed in his dream, made it a lesson for Africa, a lesson for young people, not necessarily in soccer, but maybe if you believe in your lucky star, if you refuse to be defeated by odds which are already against you, if you refuse that, well, you can certainly make it. And my last remark, it's interesting that Simon raised an issue that to make it in football, why do you have to go to Europe? I would say, as a repartee to that question, if you want to make it in Senegalese wrestling, you don't need to go to Europe. If you want to make it in soccer, you probably need to go to Europe. But if you want to make it with Senegalese lamb, traditional wrestling, Europe is your destination. Your destination are the arena in Dakar. Of course, you compound that with the fact that you need so much money and so much coaching to go to Europe that it's not the same, but it's not the same arena. So maybe it's been too long. I'll stop it here and we continue perhaps the discussion. Thank you.
Right. So the way we're going to proceed now is that we're going to have some discussion among the panelists, and then we'll be opening it up and taking comments and questions from the larger group that's participating on Zoom and Facebook. But I wanted to go back to Tarminder first, since now she's got these beautiful trees behind her outside in South Africa. And to just finish up maybe your point about when Mané is on the balcony, and maybe it follows on what Ousmane was saying about the relationships in the community.
Yeah, well, I'm going a little bit, Ousmane's commentary is fantastic. I mean, I learn a lot from him, and I'm actually just kind of making a point or linking this idea of fair trade, and trying to extract a bigger message he might implicitly be imparting to all of us. So I quote him while he's standing on this balcony, 1 hour, 10 minutes, and he's speaking to people in his village. And he goes, "I know you want many things, but education is the priority for our generation. School comes first. You should be in good health before you go to work. So let's finish the hospital." And I think, end quote. And I think this is fantastic, right? It speaks to the cliches of free trade, that the product should benefit the community from where it's extracted. As he mingled with the people, like, feels a really warm and emotional feel to the closing scenes of the film. And I specifically want to quote his uncle, who goes, his success has made us really win a lot of things. And I think that's really powerful. It's a really solid testimony. So the story of Mané tells us in 1 hour, 14 minutes that the professional football industry is totally villain-free. There are no bad guys. Even the professional football industry seems like a land where dreams come true, except for this one scene when he's served by his agent, the breakfast served in his Spanish villa, and he goes, "I consider him a very honest man. George is very human. He has a lot of heart. That's very rare in football." And then, so my question is, then what is common in football? I do imagine a football industry to be brutally competitive, almost cutthroat. And given the stakes are very high. I mean, they're working with a kind of income is just huge, right? But we can't expect that kind of version to be coming out from this good-natured, polite Mané. We really get the sense of this polite person coming along. He returns the love football bestows on him so justly. It is in his more mature focus on education, schools, houses, hospitals, that we must extract this greater and more grounded message. And that is, football is not necessarily a ticket to riches. Sadio Mané is exceptional. Still, there's an irony to this message. At the age of 15, he secretly runs away from his village and from his school to pursue a career as a footballer. For 2 weeks, he stays in Dakar without the knowledge of his family before he's found, and he recalls, and again, I quote him, and I find this quote very human and very interesting. "The day I returned to the village was the worst day of my life. I felt hate for my family. I said, I'm returning to the village on condition that I only have 1 year of school, that's it. And they respected my decision. And in grand scheme of things, he respected theirs, if only partially. Being born in the family of imams, he was not allowed to play football. He was expected to be a good example in the village by achieving success through education. 13 years down the line, after achieving success through football, not education, after defying all the expectations of his family, he addresses the crowd of young fans from his village with the words, and I quote him again, "Education is the priority for our generations. School comes first." In these few words, we hear a grounded awareness of his genius, but no arrogance. This is indeed an incredible story. He does set a good example in his village, but also for fellow rich celebrities and the leaders of the world. And my interpretation or translation of that message is, education and health are the priorities for our generation. The wealth of the world could be put to serve superior causes. And for that, I say, go Mané. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful, Tarminder. So again, let's just, if there are questions or discussion among the panelists for a few minutes, and then we can open it up beyond that.
Just to add something, that when he says he's going to write history or rewrite history. He's right. If he gets us the African Cup of Nations, well, he will be contributing to writing the history of sports in Senegal. Because remember, over so many decades, we've been very close to getting it. But each time, it is going to elude and elope us. Algeria denied us twice, and so many other countries denied us. But from the 70s, early 60s, even up to now, every session of the African World Cup, the pronostics are that Senegal may well get it, but we have never been able to get it. So we really think this time around, you know, Sadio Mané and his gang are going to destroy the Indian sign and make it possible for us to, at long last, get the cup. So that would be contributing to writing the history of sports in Senegal, I think.
The other panelists?
Can I come in? Yeah. Well, I would like to go back to what Professor Alegi, I would say, said, you know, in terms of the human side of all of this. Who is Mané? We know, I mean, the story of Mané, the story that he can make it, that he has made it, can be told for anybody who makes it. You know, anybody who gets to that stage, to that level, can write a history of can write a story of how he made it. They can talk about their determination. They can say that they knew that they were going to do it right from the time they were born. You know, you have all these stories that are really, you know, told again and again about those who make it. So my real concern myself is about those who do not make it, or those who do, because not everybody can make it. Even if everybody works very hard, everybody is determined, everybody is focused, there is only one room, or there may be 2 or 3. So only a few are going to make it the way we are talking about making it. So my point here is that we have to reconsider the way we look at making it. If success is going to be winning the Champions League, if the success is going to be winning the World Cup, yes, there is success in that, but not many people are going to win this. So we have to reevaluate our understanding of making it. And then the other thing is that Mané is certainly one example, good example, as we like to say it. I mean, the story of the role model, you know, if you do like him, you're going to make it, all right? But the truth of the matter is that apart from the suffering, I would say, because when Peter was mentioning the struggles with language, the struggle with culture, with even weather and things like that, you know, those stories are very important. They are very important, and nobody tells those stories. And those are the real stories, because we can go to Senegal and then hear stories of so many players who have moved from Oman to Kuwait, from Kuwait to Saudi Arabia, and maybe from Saudi Arabia to Colombia or whatever, in search of just the common living, just to be able to eat every day. And those stories, I think, that are very, very important to be told. And then unfortunately, we don't have so much of those stories told. I mean, that's one point that I would make at this time.
Any other comments from the panelists right now?
I don't want to be too talkative, but I just wanted to very quickly mention something in connection with what Simon said. Yeah, the focus is on success, but we should never forget those sports people who made it, but who ended wretchedly. It starts with our famous boxer who defeated Carpenter and humiliated the French, who went also in Scotland, in Ireland, and defeated, their champion. His name is Battling Siki, ending up almost living under bridges and in gutters. So, there is also that dimension of international sport for African players, being able to to make it, but not having the moral qualities of Sadio Mané ending in destitution. And there are many of those. That's also the flip side of the history. But again, as it's focused on Sadio Mané, we could not see that. We just saw the best side of sporting success. And I should say we are very happy and very proud of such a young man who can make it in that way and who remains tied to his community. That's extremely important.
Okay, I'm going to read a few comments out now that are in the Zoom chat that also some have come from Facebook. And then Papa, I don't know if are we going to be able to have live questions from the audience as well, or everything through the chat?
We can have live questions on Zoom.
Okay, well, let me read a few first, and then maybe we'll go to some live questions from the community out there. So there was a comment from Cams Bolano that Sadio, when he was injured at Metz, the movie, the documentary doesn't go into who he stayed with, his well-being, did the club pay for all that. So I think it's some of those, you know, those details that are actually really interesting that would be useful to know about. I don't know if any of us know who he stayed with or who paid for it, but all those details are really important. Freeman says he agrees with Ousmane that the factors that contributed to Mané's success and his experience at Salzburg was tremendous for him then to join Southampton. So it's the relationship. His move to Liverpool was partly because of the relationship between Southampton and Liverpool. Derek Hatzum says that he's always been frustrated about the narrative that Europe equals success and Africa equals failure. And maybe that connects to Ousmane's last point about, you know, when people are successful and then they end up in destitution as well. Jermaine Scott he found the part in the documentary fascinating when Mané says, in Europe, everyone keeps to themselves, but in Senegal, everyone shares everything. And he agrees with Ousmane that Mané already had a sense of who he was, a sense of community, which was fostered in Senegal. Derek says, I think of Soko Africa, Kermit Erasmus is no failure, having ultimately ended up in the PSL, which is, I think, in South Africa, right? The Jermaine Scott brings up the famous Liverpool, which a lot of other teams also use. You'll Never Walk Alone, which Captain Tom recently on his 100th birthday also with a hit single at 100 years old. But the song You'll Never Walk Alone. Mark Fredericks really says that sport really only becomes meaningful when the society that frames its existence is also drawn into the discussion. That's what makes the video meaningful. Kams Baleni had said in reference to Ousmane's comment that it's sad that all African players have to seek success in Europe. And as Peter said, most play in lower tier clubs that they get bought for peanuts in Africa and sold for millions. So then there are two questions from Abdul Nasir. According to general trends of African football players who've moved to Europe, what is the singularity of the Sadio trajectory? So is he really an exception, even among successful African players? And then why does Sadio start, oops, things bounced here. Why does Sadio start quiet, early investing so much in his local community when many other players, e.g. Cameroonians, start at the end of their career? So I'm going to maybe pause there and see if any of the panelists have any comments on those thoughts right now.
I guess I could chime in just briefly on whether Sadio Mané is exceptional even among the minority of players who make it to the top. Because I'm assigning this, as I said earlier, this film in my global soccer course that I'm teaching starting on the 11th of May. And what I'm going to do with it is, yes, counter the negative stereotypes, of course, that people in North America often have about Africa and Africans through, you know, the all the positives that we've talked about that are reflected in this movie, but also to show that, you know, Africa continues to provide the material and human resources that allow Europe, at least until the COVID-19 catastrophe, to enrich itself and develop further. And football is a great example of this. So among the elite footballers who make it at the top in the, say, big 5 leagues and a few of the best second-tier leagues like Belgium, Portugal, for instance, Austria, there's a few more. The Netherlands, perhaps, if we want to be generous, could be in there too. So the footballers who make it in those leagues live a very comfortable life, but they don't become the kind of, you know, 1%ers that Mané and the others become. So I would say, you know, about a third of those who make it to the professional ranks, and that's a small proportion of the total that actually emigrates overseas, fit into that mold. And those are success stories. So, you know, Mané is exceptional in terms of reaching the 1%, and he's one of the about 35%, somewhere in there, who make it to a high level, though not necessarily the big 5. So that's something to keep in mind. How that compares to players from other continents or, you know, Europeans who move from one country to another, I don't have the data at my fingertips, but I think it's amazing what African players achieve given the obstacles that they face in reaching the top. And Mané is extraordinary in that sense.
Yeah, so maybe I would add, he may be exceptional, but he's not the only one. Because, I mean, you talk about Mané, you can at the same time and in one breath say Mo Salah, right? And there were many exceptions before them. They are exceptional in the sense that they would be the talented 10s, if you want, of a happy few, if you see the thousands and thousands of young Africans who would like to make it in soccer, either locally or internationally. But if you say Sadio Mané is exceptional, you will immediately say that his coach in the Senegalese national team, Aliou Cissé, is exceptional. And actually, in the same manner as Mané is doing, Aliou Cissé also is giving back a lot to the rural community where he hailed from. In terms of behavior, in terms of being correct, never letting, you know, money actually poison your mind, you can quote Ferdinand Coly, Kalidou, Fadiga, Abdoulaye, El Hadji Diouf may be a little bit eccentric, but he is also a celebrity. Yeah, Kalidou Fadiga, right? And El Hadji Diouf is all over the world. I mean, wherever I went immediately after we defeated France, all over the world, wherever you are, they say Senegalese, and they would say, oh, El Hadji Diouf. So much in the same way as they would say it for Mané, they used to say it for El Hadji Diouf. Now, in terms of also being exceptional, I mean, compare this to somebody playing in any of those US colleges and being drafted in the NBA. Yeah, you are an exception. I think in sport, only the exceptional people would make it to the top. And I guess also in any competitive situation, you need to be particularly gifted and exceptional to be able to make it. And again, that exception is compounded by the, you know, cardinal moral values and virtues which are embedded in Sadio Mané's personality. In that sense also, he is very exceptional because most of the time, you know, money, fame, success can really poison your mind and you think you are on top and above everybody. But look at Sadio Mané, you know, dealing with younger people, dealing with his community, even talking, you know, that humility is there maybe to prompt him up all the time.
Well, can I say something?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, I would like to emphasize the fact that the story of Mané that we have is certainly a very commercial story. It is, as Matt, you know, just mentioned. You remember that section in the movie where he had the New Balance shoot session, all right, when they were doing a commercial. I didn't see any point of having there. So that reminded me that it is a very commercial movie. But again, what I'd like to say is that we cannot continue focusing on just one person. Sadio Mané may be an exception in the sense that he has very strong moral values, a good and healthy way of life, all right? But you can also make it sometimes when you don't have that. And then the other thing about Sadio Mané is that he was a little bit lucky. His way to fame was a kind of straight, Génération Foot, Metz, Salzburg, Southampton, Liverpool, and then he went to Liverpool at a time when Liverpool became the champion in Europe. So it was straight. So that is very unusual. There are so many players, Yaya Touré or Jeremy or whatever, who have moved from one country to one country. They've been the victims of agents and so on and so forth. So that story is a beautiful story in itself. But unfortunately, it is not enough for us, I think, especially for us Africans, all right? You cannot have 20,000 kids dreaming of becoming footballers, and then just one or two or three making it. And then we are proud of them, of course. I mean, it's always a good story. It's always good for our ego. But we need to scale down, I think, this idea of success and start looking at what happens to the common people. My idea of success in Senegal would be that you get up in Senegal, you are born, you get up, you go and train, and then you can play football until the end of your career, and have a decent life. And as you said earlier, Ousmane, and not be a destitute.
Yeah,
you can win, you can beat, it happened in soccer, you can beat the best team in the world or whatever one time, and then you end up being a destitute. Mané is born in different times. He's not going to have that fate, all right? But what is sure is that a lot of players and a lot of those who are not like Mané, not lucky, I would say, like Mané, and who are very talented, because Mané himself, he has said in many places that, well, I was not the best. There are many of them who are many of those Senegalese players who are very good. And then when you look at the story of immigration, the Senegal, the Nigerians, the Ghanaians, all these very talented players, Abdul Razak, Ibrahim Sande from Ghana, and then you have in Nigeria, you have Belumi, you have Assad, all those players who have Majer, all those players who have made it. The question is that there are so many who are just destitute or who cannot just make a simple living, play football.
Okay, we're going to have a couple of our Zoom attendees ask questions now. First, Shay and Dao. Go ahead. You can.
Can you hear me?
And can you say where you are in the world?
Sure. My name is Che Chernondao, and I am in Caledonia, Wisconsin, but I am from Senegal, and I was a frequent attendee of the conference in Athens, Ohio. So it's good to see a lot of people that I used to see at the conference. I have to begin to say that I love Sadio Mané. He's one of my favorite players and human being. And I also like the movie. But I have in my own opinion, the movie doesn't tell the whole story. It leaves a lot of things behind. It says Sadio Mané made in Senegal, yet it talks very little about football in Senegal, the way that it is organized. And it also doesn't talk about politics. And anybody that knows anything about Senegal knows that it is an integral part of life in Senegal. It's an integral part of sports and of life in Senegal, especially in the region that he comes from. And it also doesn't tell the whole story because it doesn't talk about all the failures of other people who are like Sadio Mané. It's very caricatural of Sadio Mané and in general. So I think they could have done more to talk about all the people that failed, all the people that he grew up with, all the people that he went to Generation Foot with, that he went to Metz with, that throughout all his itinerary that did not make it, to really give the bigger story of, yes, you can make it when you dream and all that stuff, but at the same time, very very few people make it. And I think that would have given the movie a more, that would have made it more powerful, because it would really educate people on the importance of education of people who don't make it, but also that, okay, you can make it, and if you make it, these are the rewards. But it would not leave behind the state of education, health. When he talked about his father, that was something really important that gives you a little bit of an insight in the health system in Senegal. But yeah, so those were my comments. So I would, if some of the panelists could talk a little bit more about politics in soccer in general, and the lack of politics in the movie, and education and all that, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, and let's take a few questions. We have Evelyn Bata followed by Osifeko Olekan. So we'll take those, a set of 3 questions, and then have some more discussion, and then maybe turn to some of the written questions. And I do think that we are going until what time? 9, another 20 minutes, or how?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we may not get to all of the written questions, but keep putting your questions up there, because all of this is recorded and will be available. And I think this will be an ongoing discussion. We've been talking about making this into something that maybe has another life beyond this. So so do keep on putting your questions up there. So Evelyn, to you.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, my name is Evelyn Batamriza, and I'm calling from Victoria. That's in British Columbia in Canada. But I'm originally from Rwanda. And thanks to Gerald, who I met last month in Nairobi, when we were having a meeting with the African Union on the sports and the sports role in terms of pursuing peace and peace building in the African continent. And I say that I'm really, really excited this morning to be hearing the panel members who's been giving a very good analysis about what really has happened, or what has transpired to see Sadio as a star as he is. And I cannot add anything to it. It's been fascinating to just hear different angles, how we're looking at this. So my only question or comment is really try to take this conversation a bit further and really try to exploit, and I think also really check on with all of you academicians and experts in this field, try to help us to understand how do we turn our continent from being a raw material continent into building the industry, sports industry in this sense, that would be able to propel not only Sadio, who is already made a star, but like many of you have already been saying, those other young sportsmen and women that are aspiring to be successful, or even if they're not successful, but at least to know and to consider sports as one of the field that one can consider in terms of making a living in Africa. Because I think one of the challenges, and I'm not an expert in this field, but I think one of the challenge is really to look at it as a sport as a serious thing. And when I see my kids playing outside, you're wasting time. And I think many of your parents there would agree with me that we have that kind of thinking. Whereas in this developed world, the Europe, where they go and become successful, it's considered as something very, very important as any academic that anyone would pursue. So I would love to hear from the panel members, how do we turn our continent from being a raw material supplying into building the sports industry? What are the current challenges and how do we navigate that? Thank you.
Great. And so now to Osifeko Olekan. And before though, I just want to point out that several people have pointed out, where are the women in this story, the mother, or is sport only a man's world? So I think Mariang and Wycliffe, and thank you for those. And maybe we'll get into that gendered aspect of it too. But right now, Osifeko Olekan, go ahead.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me, please? I'm Osifeko Olekan from Nigeria, but I'm speaking from South Africa right now.
Can
you hear me?
We can hear you.
All right. Okay, all right, thank you. Yeah, I just want to put on a little contributions to the sport development in Africa. So I expected that, trying to motivate the movie you will be discussing about, I think it's talking about the promotion of sport in Africa and to encourage youth or adolescents. So I'm thinking that the young celebrities should supposed to also be in the movies. Maybe we can combine with the adolescent students that are participating in the sport, that have been winning medals, but they are not rich or they don't have money. But at the same time, in order to promote health among the adolescents. So, and then the celebrity you are bringing in is, it's only about the football. Why is it only about the football? We have some other sports in the Africa, especially this one that is going on in South Africa right now, because I'm a member of the coach in training on the sitting volley, which I think is supposed to be the part of thing that's supposed to be coming up in our sports, Africa, because the sitting volley is trying to help the disabled so that the disabled can also be part of the sporting activity in the community. So they will not be, neglected or neglected as if they are not existing. So then the second thing is that I see that the benefits of this organization or the association, sport association, should be the main discussion, so that people will not see as if maybe we are promoting the celebrities, because some of those celebrities are not really coming back home after they make this money. According to what the Prof Simon said, they make the money, they're looking for their means of survival, not as if many of them really have the passion from developing sport in Africa. So I think we should also talk about how they can come back to help the adolescent, the youth, and to develop sport in Africa. Then the last one is that about the conference, whenever we are having a conference, because it's happened to me, the last conference, I couldn't be able to make it. The waiting time for visa to travel from one country to another, we should always put it in consideration before the conference dates. Thank you.
Those are good points. And yeah, our organization, we're constantly trying to figure out how to build up. And I'm glad you brought up the aspect of people with disabilities, athletes with disabilities. That's something that we also want to tackle. But on these questions, the politics of sports in Africa, and maybe between Africa and the rest of the world, and then on to Evelyn's question, building up the sport industry in Africa, why do people have to leave and how do we build up? And I think that fits in really well with this question of focusing on celebrities.
Breaking up, Martha.
Oh, sorry. Yes. How can we, I think it's when I get excited, it breaks up. So to take the view off of celebrities and look more at, as they would say when I was in Senegal, le bas, the more mass sport or sport for other people. And, how can we move in that direction? So among the panelists, any comments on these politics, raw materials, sport industry, and le bas across Africa?
Yeah, well, I'll venture a few maybe not necessarily answers, but comments. I think no matter what, Sadio Mané can be paraded as a role model, and we all need role models. You need to identify with somebody who is already a success, and from your community to be able to say, if he can do it, I can do it. Martin Luther King did great things for the mental liberation of Black people in the United States. Likewise, I think Sadio Mané being able to make it, and being able to make it without selling his soul to the devil, is the shining example of, what the young African people should believe in. That if I believe in my lucky star, no matter where I come from the most remote village with no electricity, I can compete with those people who are in the urban centers and who have electricity and all the perks. And that's a very important lesson for us here, where young people go playing soccer with their bare feet. They can't afford to buy a pair of shoes. But either in sport or in school, if they go there with enough gumption and with enough conviction that they can do it, believe in their dreams, believe in themselves, go the whole hog, as Mané said, they should be able to make it. And I think young Senegalese, young African, all over, need to, sometime create a dream which they're going to follow. For the raw material issues, look, let's be frank. If Sadio Mané had stayed in Senegal, no matter how good he could have been as a sportsman, he would not be able to make $1 million CFA a month. That translates into $2,000 a month. There is no team, there is no club in this country which could possibly offer Sadio Mané $2,000 a month. So I think I see the situation of Sadio Mané like what it could have been for me. Lecturing in some universities in the United States and being offered a contract. I never left, not because I am over much a patriot. That has nothing to do with it. But, certainly people saw that he was a good player, and his talent could be really better monetized for his own interest, and he went to make it. And just like brain drain, there is also brain gain in it. Some of us are in the United States as university professors, but even apart from the money they plow back to their country, you cannot imagine how much they get back to their own universities back home. So that issue of African going to Europe, going to the United States and making it, why couldn't they make it home? Well, first, because the little which is required for them to be able to make it does not compare with the opportunities they have home. Now, what we should be hoping that once they make it, to plow it back, give it back. Sadio Mané is doing it. Many faculties in US universities coming from Africa are doing it. So that's a way of also, in a one way, creating prosperity in Africa. Something else, politics. Who is the president of Liberia? George Weah, politics and sports. But I also understand it's interesting that it is a Senegalese who asked a question between politics and sports. That's typical of us. But the political dimension, actually, Sadio Mané was not pushed by any political force, by any political leader. He was pushed by his own capacities and capabilities and his lucky star. That's all. There was no politics in it. But of course, Sadio Mané would have played into politics without knowing it if he had won the African Cup of Nations. Because remember, 2019, we had election If we had World Cup, of course, the president won the election, but maybe if we had won World Cup, it would have been an even greater landslide victory. Sports is always there to potentially play in the hands of politics, but I should confess that in the case of Sadio, I don't smell too much of politics. Now that everything was focused on him, and I will wrap up there, yes, the title of a film itself shows us that they are going to deal with politics. And a film is also a work of art. Remember, this film is 1 hour plus. If you wanted to stuff it with other issues, how long would it have been? I think somewhere they had to stop the story somewhere, and we got plenty to discuss. All right, thank you. Proof I've been talking too much.
If I could follow up on the politics angle, since I raised it in my original comments in the video, I think it's really important. But I meant politics kind of broadly. I mean, there's so many different levels of it. So if you have been following the Michael Jordan and the Bulls series, we were about halfway through The Last Dance. I mean, Michael Jordan was the ultimate apolitical athlete. Never took a position on anything, studiously so. Some said because he was only focused on money from Nike and Gatorade and Hanes and so on. Others had other reasons, what have you. But I think nobody will ever present Jordan as a political athlete. He was very much focused on his performance and on being the global superstar that he became. Mané, similarly in the film, comes across as apolitical. Some of it maybe is his own self-presentation. Some of it is the sponsors, which included New Balance. But I also wonder, having read Todd Cleveland's book on Angolan and Mozambican footballers in Portugal, was this apolitical position that Mané put forward a calculated one that he sort of self-consciously constructed to kind of better negotiate the shark-infested waters of professional soccer, including in Senegal? So staying away from politics, was that something that he consciously and very deliberately did in Senegal? And then, of course, once he gets to Europe, I've never heard Mané taking the lead on certain issues that we see other Black footballers and footballers not just from Africa taking the lead on in Europe and elsewhere. Political issues, inequality, racism, police violence, etc. So I think that's an interesting dimension about him, but I don't know if we have time to get into all of those details.
Yeah, and speaking of time, we have about 4 minutes left. So I know that there are many more questions here and comments that are coming up, including, and I want to just highlight this because of the moment we're in. Mark Frederick said that in looking at sports capacity or the gaps, we have to think about this moment, COVID-19 and the pandemic. And, you know, while Italy has been devastated, they still have, 1,200 hospitals and 300,000 physicians, South Africa, and even the most advanced healthcare infrastructure in Africa has about 620 hospitals. So what is the post-coronavirus sporting world going to look like? And I think, that's interesting. Before we started, we were talking about the $1 tests in Senegal. So there are some bright signs out of Africa in some ways in terms of the response, but yes, this is definitely an important thing. So I think maybe if any panelist has any final thing to say, maybe you can say it in about 30 seconds. And again, to everybody, we've been talking about, we will be posting this, but maybe there might be a forum to take some of these ideas and put it into something that written academic, something like that. And we will be having some others of these coming up. But so first 30 seconds to the panelists, and then we want to invite Gerard Akindes to have some final words because he's the godfather of all of this, I think, here. So 30 seconds.
Can you hear me?
I hear you.
I'd like to make a suggestion. This is confinement. We are all locked down or kind of locked up. So what I would like to suggest is that if anybody doesn't have anything that is urgent and life-threatening to do, that we extend the conversation for the next 15 or 30 minutes. If anyone has to go for their lives, maybe they should go. I want to introduce into this the African way a little bit, this idea of having a better and a more intelligent relationship with time. So that is my suggestion. So
I have
that's my motion. That's my motion, Martha. You are the big chief here. So that's my motion.
We can do the after party. So we'll end at 9:30, but then we'll have an after party.
Okay, all right. Whichever. You are the boss. So what I would say very quickly about sports and politics. There is always going to be politics in sports, simply because it's a big stage and it is where you can kind of drag the masses, or it is also the place where you can, awake their consciousness. So sport is always going to be linked to politics. But when we talk about politics, also what we should think about is this idea that the common person's life is very important. It is not necessarily about power. It's about how do we make sure that sports brings to the people who are involved in it every day, some kind of decent way of life. About the raw materials issue, very quickly, I would say, there is no model. I would say this is a very old story, this extroverted, nature of our lives and our economies, all right? But if you want to make the industry very good, what I would suggest is that you go and talk to the market women. If they have been able to sustain their markets for a long time, they might have some kind of advice for us, all right? So, but the big models that we think are going to make us live, because there is not a lot of inequality in soccer in the world. Even in Liverpool, you have Mané 100,000 pounds a week, and then you have Salah 200,000 pounds a week, and then you go to Arsenal, to Messi, to Ozil, who doesn't do anything, and he has 325,000 a week. I mean, this is crazy. So this model, we cannot just think of implementing this model in Africa. So we have to reinvent everything in that sense.
Okay, we're going to just pause for a second because I want Gerard to say on the formal part of it, to provide some final words, but then we will continue on Gerard, I'm going to put you on the spot right now to maybe so we can see you. And we all want to thank you for one, because Gerard, if we can all clap for Gerard. Yes, he's been one of the key people along these last, how many years has it been, to keep this going and to make all this happen. I mean, other people, Papa, Bose, and others.
You too, Martha.
Well,
Yeah,
I show up, but some people are actually like making it work. But Gerard, if you want to say just a few words about maybe what we're doing next, and then we can return to the discussion for anybody who wants to stay longer.
Okay. First of all, I want to thank everybody. This was a trial. We were trying something new, and I myself enjoyed it, every second of it. I hope everybody enjoyed it, but it's great engagement, and even sometimes better than what we get in our conferences. Some panels at conferences. The conference is always engaging, but it's just gratitude to all of you for being here. And Ousmane, I pulled him in 2 weeks ago, and everybody on the panel. This was something we discussed in one of our meetings, and quickly we put it together, we put it in action. Papa started driving the technology. Bosse, we have her name but not her face, but it's been a lot of fun. And coming up, we are planning another one about 4 to 5 weeks maximum. Hopefully we'll get another very engaging one. Who mentioned that we talk more about football. I think we are trying to look into basketball. Not sure yet. We have to get a panelist, have them available to have a good discussion. But thank you all. Thanks everybody, and I'm very happy. Thank you.
All right. So yes, right, Jose. I guess if you do need to leave, I don't know if any of the panelists need to leave, but for those of you who want to stay on longer, we'll take Simone's suggestion here and keep it going for a bit. And I guess are we going to continue live on Facebook still for a while? So yes.
I have constraints, and you see me wearing this garb for the outside.
Yes.
So again, thank you very much for making me part of this. It was really great. And I look forward to further discussion, particularly with African wrestling, traditional wrestling in West Africa. That's the topic, Lamb.
Okay.
So thank you guys. I need to go out because there is a state of emergency in Dakar starting at 8 p.m. And I need to buy stuff for my to cut my fast. So again, merci beaucoup à tout le monde. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Bye, Ousmane.
Okay, bye.
Bye, Ousmane.
Bye.
I'm going to have to leave too, so thank you all. It was really enjoyable. I look forward to our next couple of sessions.
Okay.
Thank you, Peter.
Right. Congratulations to all your graduates.
Bye.
Okay.
The only one left. What is Tarminder? Okay, Tarminder, you are here.
We are still, just as a FYI, we're still on Facebook Live until we decide to drop off. So.
Okay. All right. This is the wonder of being online, flexibility, as Simone pointed out, and the African openness too, and maybe even the American after party. We don't have our drinks yet. It's too early here in the United States, so
exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So, does anybody want to pick up on any of these points? There were, I want to say, Ernest Achimapong has provided some links to some publications already that have to do with African players, some about give back behaviors. So those are in the links are in the chat box. Thank you, Ernest, for that. And let's see, Mark Frederick said sport is politics, but ideally it should be part of normal social activity, not a distraction from what is happening in politics. So that's really important. Any other things that...
Really quickly, Martha, Ernest wanted to make some comments, so he's
okay,
on.
Go ahead. Great. All right.
Itama also would like to, I think.
Thank you very much. It's been nice joining you on Zoom. I'm from Ghana, and that's from Ghana, and I've been working also in African football, as well as aspect related to women football as well. Yeah, but I think I agree with Simon when he spoke about those who are unsuccessful. What do you do to them? I think it's time we need to also trace them and see whether they are also able to fit into other sectors of the economy. Because if football fails, what next? Doesn't mean you don't have any other life or you cannot continue your life. So I think there's time we need to also have to take a look at that aspect, those who are unsuccessful, alongside those players that have been successful. But I quite remember during one of my interviews with some of the African players, they made a statement that all of us can play football, but it's not everybody that can become a professional. So that means it's the same thing as some of us may be sitting in the classroom, but not all of us will become medical doctors, lawyers, professional players, and the rest. So there is a need for people to also understand that the fact that you cannot become a successful player doesn't mean that you've not achieved a success. You need to just push hard, as well as having that strong mentality to be able to be, achieve success at every sector that you find yourself, which is very, very important. So I think this is what I would like to contribute to what Simon said. Thank you.
Wonderful. And we also want to point out that we have social media. There's Facebook, Twitter, we have other kinds of social media. and Bose wanted to make sure that we got that out there. So I will will post what those links are so that you can find them easily. All right, any other comments? Was there somebody else that we wanted to queue up for any questions or contributions at this point? Let me see, from the, yeah. Okay, Che is back on again. So.
Yes, I'm still on. Yeah, I think Ousmane's points were very interesting, but I think one of the things that we always forget is, one of the things that would be nice to highlight is that it's very hard to play football in the continent and make it a decent living. Not be a superstar, but to just be able to play and have football be your job, retire from football, and then live a successful, decent life without being a superstar. And I think that's what we were talking about, not to make it in Senegal. In this case, we're talking about Senegal being able to, but it could be Nigeria or Kenya, to just make it so that the leagues are structured in a way that will enable people to be able to have football as a job and be able to live off of it and live a successful life. I think that's kind of what some of the people were alluding to, and that's something important.
So I didn't say much, but there's something I like to say when we talk about living out of football or sport industry on the continent. The reality of sport industry is a tip of an iceberg that depends on quality of living of people, time, and from the revenue point of view, is television, ticket, sponsor are going to make sport money. And if we browse the African landscape, only a few countries can get television to go to sport, to get viewership, and then channel the money back into sport. That is not, we are not there yet. Sponsors is the same thing. Our landscape, economic landscape, is dominated by a few monopolies, except even the telephone companies. They are the only one really put some money into sport consistently right now, and just a few of them. Ticketing, if you look at how much ticketing is going to make, there's not much. Then we have to think that having a decent living out of sport on the continent is going to be for some time a dream. The other component, it is the sport culture. Our people, even when they have some money, what they call disposable income, are they willing to pay for sport? Our culture of sports as a practice, participation, and consumption is not there yet. And we are not doing anything for it to happen anytime soon. Therefore, thinking about sport as an industry, as a way to make money, such a way that the football players or any other athlete can make a living in the traditional format of sport industry we see in Europe and US, it's still a dream. I think we have to go through a different approach if we want our athletes to live out of sport, what I don't believe in much. They need to get their education, they need to get some skills. And from that perspective, also there's a challenge. I did a study in Senegal. When you have 50%, barely 50% of your kids going through school, if they don't make it to sports, how are they going to make it through life? It is a tough reality for most African countries. The options are not many to survive in sport and then to survive out of sport if you don't get education.
Okay, I know that Tarminder is in the dark now and needs to go back inside soon. So we're going to let her have some final words before she retreats into her home. So
yeah,
Tarminder?
I am in the dark in many ways of this of the term. I mean, I couldn't scroll up again, and there was a comment about the transition of Mané from escaping the school to kind of making this U-turn and saying, hey, kids, you need to go to school. And there was someone who said that they totally agree with it. I'm sorry if I'm not doing justice to it because I just couldn't read the full comment. And I think there are two things which I'm probably collectively responding to the idea of is Mané's donations a part of the neoliberal policy and all that stuff. As an academic, as a student of sports, I think I cannot say what it should be like, but we can only say what it does and what it's doing. And my point about Mané was exceptional because he is choosing to use his money. What is so interesting is that money can be used in so many different ways. He doesn't have to come back to Senegal. He doesn't have to do anything. I mean, I don't have to go back to India. I'm here based in South Africa. When I moved from, I had the time when I was living in the UK. When I moved from UK to South Africa, many people said, isn't that a demotion? Why are you going from Europe to Africa, right? So I think there are many different ways of thinking about. You can only say what is and try to better understand, rather than say this is how it should be, or this is how that, because just because of the limited power we have within what we think should be. And I think the sports industry and the way it's moving is a really good example or analogy to understand how some of the ways in which the world is working. I mean, it's totally bizarre and absolutely ridiculous that just because you can kick the ball better than others, you should be celebrated and given like huge amounts of wealth, which no human being can spend in one lifetime. And just because you cannot hit the soccer ball like that, or not good enough, you should suffer forever for the rest of your life and struggle to meet. So it's not like I'm saying, oh yeah, and now we're going to change this capitalist structure and there will be more democracy or more, I do not know, communist structure to sports, or whether you're good or bad, everybody gets paid exactly the same. I mean, there is a side we enjoy. There is an art and a beauty to what we see in professional sport, but it does help us help us to question, is it how much that beauty is worth? I mean, really? And what does the whole structure tell us about the world? So I feel Mané's doing what he's doing is exceptional and admirable within the structure. He's not changing the structure. He's not rocking the boat. The boat is working for him. So, and I'm also not trying to rock the boat because I just don't know how to, or where else it would go. But it's a worthy reflection of what the current football industry tells us about ourselves and what we value. So yeah, that's kind of all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Tarminder.
Can I come in, or you want to go somewhere else?
Yeah. Did I think Papa, you have Wycliffe queued up for some questions? Okay, so let's go to Wycliffe and then back to you, Simon. Okay.
Okay. All right.
Wycliffe, you're on.
I don't know whether it's good morning or it's good evening, wherever you are. I'm calling from Tyler, Texas, and I just want to express my appreciation for this gathering. I think this is great. Simon, in his remarks, alluded to a commercial recording that shows up in the film. And therefore, to him, he concluded that this was a commercial venture. And I want to link that to the next dream that Sadio Mané is now aspiring towards. Remember when he's at the school at the balcony, addressing the school, the kids gathered in front of him? What is it that they were asking him to accomplish? The golden ball, to be the best player in the world. And for you to be the best player in the world, you are not going to come out of obscurity. During last year's vote, was last year or this year, last year's voting, he came in third. Why did he come in third? Because there isn't so much about him in the public domain. He accomplishes so much, but his story has not been told. Many more people have to interact with his story, so that then when it comes to that critical moment of voting, because it's a popular vote, then people can identify with his story and they can therefore vote for him. So the commercial aspect, to me, I see it like it is part and parcel of reaching the top. To be the very best in the world, people have to know about you. And therefore, to me, that's one take. The other aspect that bothers me, and that also goes to, I think, what a lot of speakers talked about. A lot of African athletes, they do well. They earn a lot of money. But then they retire. After 5 years, 7 years, you start hearing about them becoming bankrupt, that they are dying in poverty. They can no longer, because you retire at the age of 35, the age of 36. You earned so much when you are 20-something, but then you blow the money away. And in the film, we hear about Mané building the school for the public, which is very good, building the hospital, which is very good, building a home for the uncle who sponsored him, which is very good, and buying the uncle a fleet of vehicles for earning an income. The thing that I'm left wondering is Mané also investing for himself? Is he also investing for himself? That's the question that I wanted to pose. But thanks so much for this event. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Wycliffe. Yes, we've known many athletes who have fallen on hard times after big success. Simon, did you have some words that you wanted to share?
Yeah, I mean,
I just point out it's about 9 minutes before 10 my time, before the next hour. So maybe we have another 9 minutes and then we'll wrap up.
Well, about Mané investing for himself, I don't know the detail. That's maybe the object of some kind of research or whatever. But what I know for sure is that he earns so much money that even what he's putting in his in Senegal is not. I don't know how much it is. I mean, somebody who makes 100,000 pounds a week can, in a month have the money for a school in Bambali, I think. So I'm not trying to belittle what he's doing at all. But what I'm saying is that in these times, it is probably easier for somebody like Mané to invest and make money. You know, he has all these agents that are working with him. And then, it is easier these days than it was before, because you have players like Salif Keita, who was a very famous African player in France. They have money, but they don't have tons of money the way Mané has money today. Now, sports and politics. As Peter said before, there are two levels. There are many levels of politics in sports. But the one that I'm mostly concerned with is the one that does not make people progress, that doesn't make the society advance. All right. This kind of politicking, seeking power, just for the benefits of a few and leaving everybody else, in the dark. this is basically my concern here when it comes to sports and politics. It is always going to be, intertwined. I mean, they are always going to be intertwined, but the result must be the well-being and the well of the people. If we don't get there, then we are not doing much, I think, especially for a continent like ours that is really poor, all right? I think I'm going to stop here. I think I had a lot of other things to say, but I'm going to stop here for now. One thing that we didn't talk about sport and racism, but Mané was certainly in the heart of this. Let's ask him to make a movie all by himself with his money in 20 years, and we're going to see how different this movie is going to be from the one that has been made by New Balance. I'm stopping here.
All right. Any final comments? I do want to say that this will be posted somewhere. I guess, Gerard, exactly where are we going to post this afterwards?
I think we have a quick website we put together for these online sessions.
Okay.
I think we'll post it there at least for now.
Okay.
And our website is still in construction, but the panel session website will be up with the recording.
Right, right. And let's see, we have we have a few minutes left. I know Sean Jacobs just come on. The global time was a bit difficult, but if Sean, do you have a question or two that you want to pose? And maybe even though you came in at the end, I know that your observations often are very to the point. So maybe you could put them in the chat, or you could, yeah. Yeah, or you can, I don't know if Papa can make you appear quickly. Sean Jacobs is the editor of the Africa as a Country. And there's Sean, and has always some very good insights. So, Sean, do you have a quick comment or two?
Yeah, I have a quick question. So I'm hoping that this question was asked. Sorry that I totally had the time wrong. I was really looking forward to this because I watched the film and I was like, oh, I really have a bunch of questions. So the quick question, which probably was answered earlier, this film, when I watched it, I thought of it as kind of a vanity project. Funded by, and I'm assuming you talked about this already, New Balance is everywhere. So I wondered if people talked about that, because there are projects like this. I remember there was a Thierry Henry film that was kind of like this, where you don't actually learn anything about these people. And what you just get is sort of like, look how wonderful they are. And the way the story is told is also kind of, they're telling us a backstory because we know he's gonna make it. So he says, nobody thought I would make it, but we know he's gonna make it. So it's just something about that I thought was where the people talked about kind of the politics of that. And then also like there's a lot of silences in the film. For example, I think Peter tweeted earlier today a picture of books he was like reading before he came on the meeting, which is the role of these academies. And so the academy, the academy is really glossed over, gets like a nice treatment, and we moved on. So there was just like elements of it that I thought, I have other questions, but I know I'm now taking up time. So it's like, damn it, I'm just mad that I couldn't come at the beginning. But I'm wondering if those things came up in the discussion.
Yeah, to some extent, although I think the way you phrase it also helps us think a little more deeply about it. And perhaps we can again emphasize that we've had discussions about trying to take this and make it into something, a set of writing, a publication or something like that. And certainly Africa as a Country was one possible point for this. There may be other points too, but I think, and as well in this format, we're going to be doing basketball, there may be other things, and taking advantage or having to work with what we have in the time of COVID does allow us actually to connect with things like this with each other. That we don't want to wait you know, for every year to try to do all the work to get a conference together, and then it happens over 3 days, and then poof, we're gone. So these kinds of events, maybe it allows us both synchronous and asynchronous connectivity over time.
Mother,
yes.
The earlier question I posed about the role of the mother.
Ah, right. Yes.
And you have written about female sport. What is your personal take about that?
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. I don't know enough about Bombali, the village there. I mean, obviously, his father died when he was young, and his mother raised him, but also the uncles raised him, and so the uncles came in too. So it was a very, at least the way it was presented in the film, very dominated by the men. Although we know that in the Casamance, I mean, in terms of sport in Senegal, earlier Ousmane was talking about wrestling, that actually women do wrestle, have traditionally wrestled in the Casamance. And so not to say that it's treated the same way that men's wrestling is treated. But yeah, we don't really get a sense of that. And actually, it's also interesting. Sadio Mané seems to be a single, so there's no wag there, wives and girlfriends or anything like that, which may also go along with his very devout frame. But yeah, so we don't really get much information about that at all. And I think actually going back to Marianne, she also had a post in the comments that by looking at this, you really only think that football has anything to do with men. And, you know, I mean, for me, it's a very simple thing. It's very elemental. But when people talk about the national team or something, or the World Cup, it's always in the reference to the men's World Cup. It's like, wait a minute, you know, and you may have heard yesterday that the judge ruled against the U.S. women's national team in their fight for equity in pay. They're going to move again on that. But I think that, yeah, there's so much work to do on women in sport, and to claim that even when we look at the negotiations going on right now around Newcastle and Saudi Arabia, there is a woman, a very prominent woman, involved in all that, but we don't really get a sense of women who are involved even in the men's sport, let alone in women's sport. So I think we just need to pay attention to that and try to work on it. Okay. All right. It is my time, 10 o'clock in California. Now it's 10:01 in California. I think that 2 hours, I don't know if anybody would watch this 2-hour recording. They might for posterity's sake. But I think at this point, we probably ought to close. And I want to, again, thank our sponsor, the Ohio University, for really helping us, the West African Research Association, the African Studies Association, and our organization, Sports Africa. We really encourage people to join it. And one of the key things is that if you are a member of ASA and you're a member of Sports Africa, that really helps us. If you are on the continent, if you are on the African continent, the membership rates for both the Sports Africa and the African Studies Association are fairly reasonable. There are ways even to get sponsorships. So if you have questions about that, definitely send it to us. We don't quite know when the next in-person conference will be, but we are planning to try to do the postponed one that was going to be in Port Elizabeth at Nelson Mandela University sometime in, I guess, 2021. So keep an eye out for that. But there will be other opportunities for us to gather in these formats.